Africa commemorates 29 years since the country's first democratic elections. Many citizens question whether it is a day to celebrate, as many do not feel free. Service delivery, unemployment, never-ending load shedding and corruption are some of the challenges facing the country. Let's discuss this further now. We are joined via Zoom by political analyst Thobani Zikalala. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon, Mr. Zikalala. Many South Africans, as you've heard, commemorating Freedom Day. On the one hand, very delighted to do so, but they are doing it under very difficult conditions. How then can we best embrace, the freedoms gained through democracy, when on the one hand we can see how many South Africans are still languishing in abject poverty, due to a number of factors?
Good afternoon, Unati. Good afternoon to your viewers. I think the first thing will be, one of the things that we didn't do thoroughly when we made the transition to the society we live in now is to reimagine a society in terms of the logic and the idea of what the new society will look like and how it will feel and how people are going to be included in it. Because what we did in 1994, we simply, of course, other scholars have said this, we simply gained what people would call flag independence. We got a new constitution, we got a new freedoms here and there, but the logic of how this society operates, if you look at how those who are poor have continued to be poor, and it's because the logic of the society we live in has not changed. And I think that's what the government should have focused on, of how do you change the logic, the workings of this system, this society we live in such a way that those who are excluded feel included and are able to be at the center of how the society works.
Because narrative is important, right? And I want you to expand on this logic that hasn't changed, and particularly by looking at, the youth. The youth vote is under the spotlight currently, with many saying and acknowledging that, young people have the numbers to bring change into this country. But the majority of young people are still not interested in making their voices heard, through the ballot. When you also look at statistics around the 2019 elections as an example, we know that while 17 million people registered to vote in the election, only 10 million people showed up. What can you attribute to voter apathy, and particularly in the youth?
The political space in terms of its leadership is predominantly old, is predominantly based on the things people have done in the past. It has this idea of a nostalgic type of idea of where leadership is, right? We live in a society, of course, where leadership is also described on the basis of age. But unfortunately, and on the other part, and this is what we always say to young people, is that if you look at all political formations and political spaces, young people are the majority. But the problem is you also have a politics in South Africa, which is very much predominantly about who has what and who knows what and who knows who. And so with young people not seeing themselves and their counterparts in the leadership of this country, it's going to be very difficult for them to be able to participate in the electoral process. While on the other hand, there's not been much civic and voter education in the country to make people of South Africa realize and know why it is important to vote. Where we have maybe failed is that we have made the voting thing to be about we vote because there are those who have sacrificed their lives in the past so that we can gain this right, so all of us must vote. And I think at some point that type of thinking and explanation to young people will one day hit a snag. What you need to do, you need to have a civic education that informs young people why it is important for them to vote today. But also you have a situation of a South Africa that does not really have an understanding of how South Africa's political system works. So there are many issues, and of course with the government that for some is perceived not to be doing the necessary things in terms of service delivery and making sure that everyone is able to participate. When you look at the rising political elite that continues to rise, and young people seeing this idea that politics is about a connected few who continue to benefit, whereas the majority of the society is left excluded. This is young people then saying, maybe I should not participate in this thing, because what what would it change? And I think the Independent Electoral Commission of South Africa and many other stakeholders in this country still need to do a lot of work around civic education and voter education to make sure that young people are able to participate. It is shocking because, as I said, in any space politically, young people are the majority. We are the majority in terms of those who are eligible to vote in South Africa. But when you go to the ballot, young people are not there. But young people also are the ones who face the wrath of everything that goes bad in this country. It is them who face the after effects of that, but it is also them who are not willing to participate in a process that maybe could change their lives.
All right, we just touched on now how, civil society should reimagine a new South Africa and get better engaged. Let's talk now about the leadership. Are they disengaged? I mean, President Ramaphosa today spoke at the significance in our history of taking this year's celebrations to Matlosana. Yet we know that this area resides in the Northwest Province with a recorded unemployment rate. I think that is just over 35%, in the third quarter of 2021, which was higher than the national figure of 34.9% for that very same period. Are we dealing here with a disengaged leadership in the sense that around you there is lack of service delivery, there's abject poverty, youth unemployment, all of these problems, and yet you take this national important and significant day where people are disillusioned?
Let me put it this way. I don't think the leadership of this country has the same aspirations with the citizenry and the citizens of this country. I think the citizens of this country are looking for a different nirvana, a different society, whereas the leadership of this country are currently driving in a different direction. We are currently in a political highway going in a direction where the people of South Africa have been left behind at the hiking spot, screaming and shouting for the transport to go a different direction. It's like South Africans are standing at a T-junction and they are shouting at the leadership of South Africa to say, you are taking a wrong way. But unfortunately, the leadership of this country has taken that route, and that route is a highway. There seems to be no off-ramps, and in a way, people of South Africa are not going to benefit much. Because if you look at what is happening in this country, you sometimes get confused whether the leadership of this country knows what is going on. But also, the leadership of this country is so much embattled in their own internal political battles. On the other hand, involved in what I could call the politics of spectacle, the politics of being seen to be doing something. So it's this idea of a government that each and every year announces programs, commits to particular things, makes events, and all these things, and make us appointments here and there. But in substance, each and every year the situation gets better. So we have a situation where there is a crisis in this country. The president of this country will come out, call a commission, call a summit, and declarations are going to be made. But if you follow up, nothing will change, because the commitment from the leadership of this country, I don't think it is there. And also, as I said, I don't think where South Africans want to go is where this government or this leadership of this country as a whole, in the political landscape, is listening to where the people of South Africa want to go.
If this country's democracy then depended on an informed youth, going forward, as we wrap our conversation, what is that little bit of hope that South Africans can have to have this reimagined future? How can the youth take control of the freedoms that we have gained and make sure that we have a future that is free of corruption, has employment rates that are high, and has a sustainable economy? I mean, when you look at the political landscape at the moment, it doesn't inspire much confidence, as you rightfully said. So just a little bit of hope for South Africans out there. What do the youth need to do to have a reimagined South African? And I like what you said, logic of our society hasn't changed. How can they change that narrative and that logic?
A parting shot will be this. Kwame Ture Stokely Carmichael, an American liberation fighter, once said at some time, do not mourn, mobilize, do not mourn, organize. And by that, I mean, young people of this country, if they're not organized, right, if they are not organized in such a way, Bristol social cultural claims are able to be so succinct in such a way that every young person will be able to understand them. Because if they are not organized, and this is what happens even in some of the political formations they are part of, is that even though they are all young, even though they may agree on particular things, but because they are not organized as a unit, understanding the direction they want to take, their own powers that they hold, young people are unable to do many things. So for me, the hope will be on the idea that if young people get more organized, get more politically and civic education, then we can be able to move forward. But at this point, with the young people that seems to be so disengaged from politics, so disillusioned by politics because it feels, and of course with the expression of the logic of this society, that politics and leadership of this country belongs to the old. These young people of this country must look into the history of this country and acknowledge this. The trajectory of the history of this country was changed by young people. At any political epoch in this country, at the forefront of that epoch, it was young people. In 1976, led the June 16 uprisings, which led to the instability of this government, that led to the state of emergency, that led to 1994 being able to be possible. So young people must always take stock of that historically, there's no society that has ever changed without the leadership of young people at the forefront. So young people must know the changing of South Africa's history and trajectory belongs to them, and it is in their hands. It is up to them what they do with the responsibility that they carry.
Thobani, let's leave it there for now. Thank you so much for your analysis and, of course, those words of encouragement, I would say, for the youth of South Africa.